Hi, I'm Kathy Feeney, and I'm the Chief of the Center for Food Protection at the Rhode Island Department of Health. I'm here with you today to talk about food safety and the Summer Food Service Program. The agenda today will include information that we need at the Department of Health at the start of the Summer Lunch Food Service Program, as well as food safety priorities for inspections, areas of focus to ensure safe food, which include personal hygiene, time temperature control, preventing cross-contamination, and allergen cross-contact, and cleaning and sanitizing. Every year before we start the Summer Food Service Program, we need to get a list of sponsors and sites for each district. We need the addresses, including preparation kitchens and the satellites such as playgrounds. We need the times of meal service. We need to know the type of service, whether it's a commissary and you will be delivering food to other sites, or if you're a satellite kitchen just receiving food. We need a copy of the menu. We need an idea of your delivery schedule and contact information. And that includes the person in charge, the certified food safety manager, as well as a phone number and an email address. The most important topics for the Summer Food Service Program, as far as food safety goes, can be broken into 4 boxes. They include personal hygiene, preventing cross-contamination and cross-contact, time temperature control, and cleaning and sanitizing. Under personal hygiene, we talk about hand washing, no ill food handlers, and no bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food. Under preventing cross-contamination and cross-contact, we talk about keeping raw foods separated from those that are ready to eat that won't receive further cooking, preventing allergens from being transferred from one food to another, and also separating utensils, equipment, and food contact surfaces between raw food and ready-to-eat food, and also food that contain one of the 8 main allergens. Time temperature control, we talk about the temperature danger zone of 41 to 135 and the importance of keeping food out of that zone as much as possible. We also talk about cleaning and sanitizing, which is washing, rinsing, sanitizing all your equipment, utensils, cutting boards, and so forth between uses, and using the proper concentration of your sanitizer, whether it be quaternary ammonia or chlorine bleach. Under personal hygiene, the first thing we talk about is hand washing. If you handle food, you know you need to wash your hands often. Now, hand washing's got a lot of attention with this pandemic, and so it's really increased people's awareness of how important it is. And remember, your hands might look clean, but germs are microscopic, so you really need to wash because you're not going to see these microorganisms. So washing your hands obviously keeps you from getting sick and also prevents you from making your customers ill. And when should you wash your hands? You should wash your hands as soon as you get to work and after you use the restroom, after sneezing, eating, drinking, smoking, switching gloves. In between glove changes, you should wash your hands. Anytime you change tasks, wash your hands, and after touching your hair, face, or clothes. In Rhode Island, there's no bare hand contact allowed with ready-to-eat food. And ready-to-eat food is food that is not going to receive further treatment, such as cooking or processing to kill microorganisms. So it's in the form that it can be served. So that includes things like, sandwiches, salads, fruit, things that you don't cook. By law, food service workers must either use utensils or gloves when handling ready-to-eat food. There are many types of foodborne illness. There are some that are more contagious than others, and some that are transferred through food pretty readily, and those are what we call the big six. And that's norovirus, hepatitis A, Shigella, sugar toxin producing E. coli, Salmonella typhi, and non-typhoidal Salmonella. If an employee has any one of these illnesses, they are required to report it to their manager or supervisor immediately. This is an employee illness decision guide. So if an employee comes to work and they have symptoms such as vomiting, diarrhea, or a sore throat with fever, they need to be excluded from work. So that person would need to go home. If somebody in somebody's household is ill, but they're not ill, the food worker may come to work. But it's really important that that person either be restricted to certain duties or wash their hands properly, make sure that they're never touching any food with their bare hands, wearing gloves properly. And also, if the person becomes symptomatic and has vomiting, diarrhea, that they go home immediately. Many people have food allergies, and they can range in severity. We have 8 of the most common food allergies, and those are from peanuts, tree nuts, from fish, shellfish, eggs, milk, wheat, and soy. So they're the most prevalent and most likely to cause an allergic reaction. It's super important to keep things separate and to wash utensils, cutting boards, and even pots and pans between different foods so that you don't inadvertently contaminate a food with an allergen from another food that somebody might eat, not knowing that that food had that allergen. When storing food in the refrigerator, it's important to store it to prevent cross-contamination. So foods that aren't going to be cooked, which we consider ready to eat, should be stored up on top. And foods that are cooked to the highest temperature, like poultry, need to be stored on the very bottom. So poultry has to be cooked to 165 because of the salmonella content in poultry. So you don't want to store something like poultry above something like a ready-to-eat food where it won't be cooked at all and people could become sick from salmonella from eating that food. Also, things like ground beef have to be cooked to 155. You don't want those above something that's only going to be cooked to 145 because the E. coli will not be killed at that lower temperature. Now, not everybody can store things, exactly this way. We know that because refrigerators are only so big, but it's still essential to keep things separate from each other and try as much as possible to store them by minimum cooking temperatures. So here are a bunch of temperatures. So we have the temperature danger zone right here, which is 41 to 135 in yellow. We also have the cooking temperatures. So the poultry and stuffed foods are 165, ground meats are 155, other foods like steaks and fish are 145. And then if you want a hot hold food, it has to be at least 135. And cold holding is always 41 or below. If you're trying to reheat a food and it's a commercially processed food and it's already been cooked and now you're reheating it once, then you only have to bring it up to 135. However, if it's a food that's been made from scratch in the kitchen and you're cooling it, you've prepared it ahead of time, you're cooling it, you're reheating it, then it has to be reheated to 165. But again, you want to keep food out of that temperature danger zone as much as possible. The bacteria grow best between 41 and 135. To keep food out of the temperature danger zone, one of the things that you can do is refrigerate all your ingredients. So after you take them out and do your food preparation, they won't get as warm. So that would be your cans of tuna or your mayonnaise. You can even refrigerate your bread prior to making sandwiches, or like semi-freeze the cold cuts and the cheese. That way, it's not in that temperature danger zone between 41 and 135 for an extended period of time while you're doing the food preparation. Also, making things in small batches and taking out just what you need and putting things back into the refrigerator as soon as possible after you make your sandwiches. The most important tool in your kitchen when it comes to food safety is your thermometer. And thermometers get out of whack if they get dropped or if they get banged around. So you need to calibrate your thermometer regularly. And the easiest way to calibrate a thermometer is what we call the ice point method. When you fill a glass with ice and add water and make a slurry, and then you put your thermometer into the glass and adjust the nut that's under the dial until it reads 32. If you're using a thermocouple, it's actually calibrated by the manufacturer, but it's important to check those too. And you can check them against another thermometer, or you can check them against your calibrated bimetallic thermometer to make sure it's accurate. We see a lot of slices in school kitchens, and they never look like this, but we had an outbreak a few years ago, and when we went to the restaurant to investigate, we came across this slicer. And you can see on the left-hand side that there's a lot of accumulation, a lot of debris along the nut and also along the blade. And also on the right-hand side, we lifted up the leg, and there was a lot of old debris, and you could tell it had been there for a while underneath the leg. So we actually sampled this, we swabbed it, and our lab result came back positive for salmonella. So in this slide, we're looking at the side view of the slicer. And there's a little white piece, and we actually had to use a tool to remove it. And when we looked underneath it, there was an accumulation of debris. And we swabbed that area and came back with another positive for salmonella that matched the outbreak strain. So this led to a lot of awareness about slicer design and the difficulty people have cleaning slices. And so FDA published some guidance documents on cleaning slices, and industry actually started looking at different ways to manufacture slices so they're more continuous, so they don't have these areas that you can't get at to clean them properly. And on the next slide, I'll show you a part of the guidance document that FDA developed right around the same time. This is part of the guidance document that was developed by FDA to describe proper cleaning of the slicer. And you can download this at www.fda.gov/retail food protection. And it comes in poster size that you could actually put on the wall next to the slicer so employees could refer to it when they're cleaning the slices. Last but not least, let's talk about the 3-bay sink and the procedure to wash, rinse, and sanitize. So in the first bag, you put your detergent and you wash. You need to rinse in the second bag and get all the detergent off of the utensils or the dishes, and make sure that you do that before you put it in the sanitizer. Otherwise, the sanitizer is not effective. You also want to make sure you're using the sanitizer at the correct concentration. And there's test strips for each type of sanitizer, whether you're using chlorine or quaternary ammonia, to measure the concentration so you can make sure it's right, so that when you let your dishes and utensils and such air dry, there isn't a residue, but it's at a concentration that's effective enough to kill microorganisms. So this slide summarizes everything we talked about. It's part of the fightback.org food safety campaign, and it shows separating. Make sure your raw foods are separate from your ready-to-eat foods. Remember, your ready-to-eat foods are the things that aren't going to receive further cooking. When you're cooking food, making sure that you cook to the proper internal temperature. For poultry and for stuffed foods, it's 165. For ground meat and sausage, it's 155. For other foods like pork chops and fish, it's 145. Cold holding is always 41 and below. If food is left out between 41 and 135 for an excess period of time, which usually is about 4 hours, it would need to be discarded. You want to be checking things often. You want to check to make sure your employees feel good. You want to make sure that food is cooked to the right temperature. You want to make sure your refrigerator is holding food at 41 or below, or even food in the cooler, making sure that it stays at 41. You want to make sure you're cleaning properly by washing, rinsing in between, and then sanitizing at the correct concentration. And the way you know that is that you're using test strips to measure either the chlorine or the quaternary ammonia concentration so that it's effective in killing microorganisms, but there's no residue that could be toxic. This concludes our presentation. I hope you found it helpful. We highlighted some of the things that we're most concerned about with food safety. School food services definitely do a fantastic job. There's very little issues when we do those inspections. We want you to keep up the good work and have a wonderful summer. Thank you.